So, it's updates about anarchist and anti-war resistance in Russia. It is some stuff being updated from the previous talks I did for events updates of the previous months. But first I will be mostly talking about the prisoner things, but first a bit about kind of so-called anti-war movement in general and what is right now. What comes to street protest, they are pretty much finished. Like you can see that in the first year of the war, it was almost 20,000. I had to make this a bit bigger. So it was almost 20,000 arrests. This is statistics by the NGO Ovede Info. Originally, they were founded some years ago to monitor arrests in the protest action in Russia and follow up the people who are arrested, but now there is not like super much arrest happening in the street protests. So they have a wider perspective. They also helping political prisoners. But this is what they gathered in the first years of the war. So we can see that in the first year it was almost 20,000 people detained for anti-war protests. In the second year it was 270. Last year it was 40 people arrested, and this statistics is until May of this year, and we see only like 10 arrests in the anti-war protest. There are still a couple of cities where you can have these one-person pickets against the war. They are couple of very stubborn individual people who go out to these sections and they are not arrested. So this kind of small street demonstrations, they are still happening. They are possible in some places, but in general, the street protesting is dead. Some examples of movement. One example of movement that has been organizing these street protests in the first year of the war, it was the feminist anti-war resistance. It's not the only one, but it's one of the biggest. They still have like 28,000 subscribers in their Telegram channel, and it used to be even a bit more. It's now banned organization in Russia, so people might be a bit afraid to follow them in the Telegram. They were calling for decentralized protests that spread to 78 cities. So this is kind of cities that they have people reporting. The areas where they are active are here marked with this red color in this map, and the cities also are marked that they are active with. I put this a bit bigger. So this is the situation like maybe 2 years ago, but they eventually stopped promoting anti-war street actions at the moment when people started to be heavily persecuted for this. There were these so-called laws against fake news, and people got several years of prison sentence. And the 8 Initiative group in St. Petersburg was targeted. It's one of the founder groups of the network. They were targeted with some repression. There were some frame up that they had been making some phone threats and people arrested, so they had to escape abroad. So now actually lots of the people from these feminist networks, they have been going back to other feminist fields that are maybe not so risky. Because from any talking about the war, you can get several years of prison sentence. But if you, for example, can pay for reproductive rights, it might be more possible still in Russia. And this is also important because there is a huge wave of conservative, kind of counter-revolutionary things happening in the society, going back to like conservative stuff, and one part of this is attempts to restrict abortion. There are different kinds of things happening, like mandatory consultation and all the kind of shit to press people not to do abortions, which was impossible to imagine like 20 years ago. Like Russia used to have a complete free abortion, so this is also important field of feminist struggle. So then discussion who is supporting the war, who is against. This slide's a bit old, but I checked the case in February this year. There is also not anymore so fresh polls. But in the February this year, in the polls it was between 43 and 52% pro-war and 45 and 48% anti-war. This is basically to the question that should there be negotiations, should the war finish? So this is nothing about the conditions of ending the war. Probably if you ask that should Russia give back Crimea to Ukraine in order to get the peace, the answers might be different. So the amount of Russians who are kind of determined to continue the war until the victory, it has fallen between 10 and 20% from what it was in the beginning of the war, and it keeps falling. But at all the times, this has been very polarized from different groups of people. People who are rural, they tend to be more pro-war than people who are living in the cities. Older people tend to be more pro-war than younger people. Men tend to be more pro-war than women. But the most kind of clear indicator is who is watching the television. So in all the age groups, people who don't watch the television, they are the most anti-war, because television is the most effective propaganda, and people who are kind of not interested of the pro-war propaganda, they don't watch the television. So already in the first year of the war, people who were under 30 years old and who don't watch the television, they were 80% anti-war. But these polls we also have to take a grain of salt. Russia is not a really free or democratic country. It's a bit risky to answer the polls. This picture from the left is quite old. It's from the first year of the war, around maybe April 2022, from a company which is doing a street polling. But for them, when they ask questions related to politics of war, it's like 60% of the people who refuse to answer altogether. So it's in the phone polls and online polls, the answering chances that people are actually answering and telling their opinions, they're higher, but it's still people basically might be afraid to say their real opinions. So the polling is not completely reliable. So why in general the anti-war movement is quite weak? One of the main reasons might be that the economy is pretty strong. There is Russia had many years, maybe 20 years, they were putting money from the export of gas and oil. This stabilization fund. So they were basically not putting the oil money to economy, but they were just putting it to some fund, not increasing the welfare or pensions or healthcare or education or whatever. The money was just put to some big bank account. And now they are finally spending this money, and they are spending this money for the war industry, but this money is leaking into the economics. It's going to people's salaries, wages, the unemployment is almost zero. So especially in the smaller places into smaller industrial cities, the growth of level of living might be quite substantial. Also, Russia is advancing at the front, and the victory of Russia is possible. And unfortunately, if we think about cases when actually, it's not many cases that soldiers have actually managed to halt the war by deserting and by refusing to fight. There are a couple of them, like Russia in the First World War and then Germany in the First World War. But this usually happens at the point when the war is already lost, and there is no point of continuing fighting, but this is not the Russian situation. Also, the conscription is not, it's still a problem for just a small minority of Russians. Vast majority of of people who are going to war. They are like formally contract soldiers, so professionals. Of course, there is a thing that during when young people are conscripted in, there are lots of army like regiments where there is a huge pressure to sign as a contract soldier. So it's not always necessary like voluntary thing, but it's not that people are kidnapped in the streets to go directly to the front. It's just mostly I think it's only between, for example, there was this mobilization in year 2022, but only between 10 and 15% of the losses in the front, they are these mobilized soldiers. Might be, of course, that there will be more mobilizations coming up still. Then it's the cases that many people who have opposed the war or have left Russia. Yeah, it's obviously like maybe more than 1 million people left Russia since the war started. Some of them have returned, but if these people were staying in Russia, there might be more protest happening. And obviously, yes, there is some unprecedented wave of repression. Many people basically say they're kind of their main means of political struggle. It might be going to street protest or voting. None of this is possible now. And might even writing online to social media. Some more messages, it might cause you trouble. So this is what people are protesting. It's a bit small script. I will increase. But Activatica, it's a group. They are gathering statistics on what people are actually protesting. And you can see that there is actually this is from first part of this year. It's January, February, March, April, and this is from the protest. So this can be a small protest or it might be a bigger one. Usually small protests around Russia that they have been able to track. And it's possible still in many areas to make anti-repression protests. So we can see that in February there were almost 140 anti-repression protests around Russia. But in many places it's not possible to protest the war. But we still have some between 20 and 40 each month in first half of the year. But yeah, biggest peaks we see in February is anti-repression, and March and April we have many environmental protests. But all the others have, almost all the others have also non-zero amount, like urban development, housing and transport, workplace issues. All of these are issues that worry Russians, and there are protests happening. So it's possible to protest, but only very few areas it's possible to do anti-war protests. So this is why people who want to protest the war are moving to direct actions. And we see 230 direct actions in 2023 and 145 in 2024. This is also from the Activatica website, and more red is the area, more actions there are. Activatica, they don't try to separate actions that are made by the Ukrainian Secret Services, because there is also Ukrainian Secret Services is doing successful infiltration over the front line and making sabotage actions. But obviously, like there is basically differences in the level of professionalism. Like if there is, for example, some army general assassinated in Moscow, it's probably Ukrainian Secret Services. But if there is some homemade Molotov cocktails that almost burns a building but not really, then it's probably no involvement of the Ukrainian Secret Services. There is a special category of the scammer actions. They are separated from this list. They are not included in these numbers. It's because it's a special thing that is happening. Ukraine has lots of the online scamming industry. And they are basically, it's an organized crime, but some of them are also want to fight against the Russian invasion. So what they do, they basically are hijacking someone's bank account by hacking or social engineering, and then they are telling to these people, mostly it's quite old people, that okay, if you want to get back your savings, you have to throw this Molotov cocktail, and people usually go for this, and they get caught, and then they adapt to some years in prison. But yeah, this is not included in numbers, but of course in the general society, it's a bit like discrediting the concept of the direct action, because of course the state propaganda is saying that all of these direct actions they are doing by people who are being scammed, or by Ukrainian secret services. But this is not the case. People are still doing direct actions also for real political reasons. And also it's probably, yeah, you can see in the closure of the Ukrainian border, there are lots of these red areas. This might be Ukrainian sabotage sections, but then somewhere far in Siberia, it's probably made by some genuinely anti-war people. So this is example of the direct actions. This is just pictures from the last year, of the May of last year. Authorities said that this was a sabotage action against a freight train, and yeah, so if authorities say it's a sabotage, it probably is. They're not so close to the Ukrainian border, so this might be some anti-war people. So some bit about the groups that is doing the sabotage. Most of this is actions, like vast majority of the sabotage is not claimed by any group, but one of the group that has claimed sabotage actions is the Anarcho-Communist Fighting Organization. It's a continuation of New Russian anarcho-insurrectionalism. Originally, it was one of the inspirations was the Greek protest of 2008. And there was a wave of insurrectionalist direct actions in Russia between 2008 and 2013. But this kind of died out, but these networks and groups, they were still existing, and now they have kind of revitalized their activities. No member of BOAC was ever arrested or imprisoned, but many have been forced to escape Russia. There have been a couple of close calls. You can follow their blogs. In the no blogs, they also have a Telegram channels, and the main information resource is Onion site. Now there are less people remaining in Russia who are in these networks, but they are basically trying to maintain communication networks and also spreading guidelines how to do direct actions securely. These are some actions from a couple of years ago. There was in the left side, this might be somewhere in Ivanovo region. It was sabotage of a train line that is only carrying freight transport, no passenger transport. Another one is close to Barnaul in Siberia. A couple of years ago, there was also derailing of a freight train. This was also claimed by the BOAC. Then a bit about the organizations that are supporting the prisoners. One of them is Ogni Svobody, Fires of Freedom. This was established in 2025 because Anarchist Black Cross of Moscow got unwanted status. I think there is later a slide about Anarchist Black Cross. And there is a Telegram channel. It's basically doing things that Anarchist Black Cross was doing before it was banned. Helping the prisoners with lawyers, parcels, and so on. Then Solidarity Zone. This is also an organization established by anti-authoritarians already in the first year of the war. It was basically the first organization who was supporting these direct action prisoners, because many human rights organizations, they were always a bit hesitant to support prisoners that are basically doing this kind of guerrilla activities. Now it's a bit different. Many human rights and liberal activists, they have actually started to support radical direct action prisoners, but this was not the case 3 years ago. The Solidarity Zone, they are supporting around 20 direct action prisoners. That yeah, this is actually a bit outdated. In fact, the traditional human rights organizations, they are actually supported. Some of them nowadays, but not like 1 year ago. And they don't have enough finances to support or regularly correspondent with lawyers of more prisoners, but they are also following 20 more cases. And it's not like very good statistics from the last year and a half, how many people actually have been persecuted of the direct actions, but I think this was from the early 2024. I think over the info was tracking 29 people who were actually being persecuted with terrorist charges, and 46 people who were persecuted with the arson cases. This is partially overlapping, so I'm quite mostly actually overlapping, because most of the people who do arsons, they of course also get the terrorist charges. So more or less Solidarity Zone has managed to find out most of these people, which is not very easy, because usually these people are not connected to movements, they are acting alone out of the desperation. So there is maybe some news in some local media that is being tracked by the Solidarity Zone, and they then have to start to check what are the possibilities in which prison these people might be residing, and then they have to change the lawyer, establish contact. It's quite a tedious work, but they have been quite successful. Then a question like, does it make even sense to support prisoners in a situation when you actually cannot much influence the results of the court? So there are a couple of examples of successes of prisoners supporting struggles. For example, 2 years ago, a bit more than 2 years ago, anti-war prisoner Ivan Kudryashev, that is supported by the Solidarity Zone, won the hunger strike after 40 days. And he gained a promised access to the vegan food and vitamins that were sent to him in parcels. Before the hunger strike, these were refused from him. And also another prisoner, Viktor Filinkov, he was spent 7 years in prison, accused of being a member of underground armed anarchist organization, so-called network case, mostly completely fabricated case. He spent 7 years in prison, and in the prison he was often sent to the isolation, but he managed to challenge this with the court with help of the supporters. So this improved his conditions a lot. And of course, this is small victories, but whoever is in prison, it's a big victory. If you get out of the hole, if you get the vitamins, it's a big success. So then, yeah, this slide that I was expecting to come out more early, the Anarchist Black Cross of Moscow, it's already quite old organization. It's has been around for 22 years. It's supporting repressed anarchists, anti-fascists, and anti-authoritarians, and currently the prisoner listing of ABC Moscow, it has 22 prisoners. That and many of them has been in prison for some anti-war activities during the last couple of years. The Anarchist Black Cross in Moscow, it's unwanted, so-called unwanted organization in Russia. It doesn't sound very, very serious, but it is. You can be sentenced to 3 years in prison just to give any kind of support to Anarchist Black Cross of Moscow. So this is why the activities of Anarchist Black Cross in Moscow are now abroad, like most of the members. And for example, one of the, besides the lawyer, like fundraising to initiatives that are still residing in Russia, it might be organizing evacuation of people who are facing a risk of being arrested. For example, they have already been arrested and interrogated, but not yet in prison. An evacuation of a person from Russia, it's around 900 pounds. It's something like 1,000 euros of cost. And Yeah, and you can donate with the cryptocurrencies and PayPal. There is also like English newsfeed in Autonom website and Telegram channel in English. One of the prisoners supported by Anarchist Black Cross in Moscow and also by the Fires of Freedom is Ruslan Siddiqui. Is accused of railway sabotage and drone attack against the military airport in the Ryazan region. Sentenced to 29 years in prison. This May, it's basically the biggest sentence that has been given to anarchists. Might be ever, because I think even Stalin's sentences were like maximum 25 years, even if of course, or death sentence. So or sometimes death sentence in practice when people were sent to places that you won't be able to survive. But yeah, is now again fundraising going on for Ruslan Siddiqui. This is where it happened. Ryazan is a place not so far from Moscow, in the southeast from Moscow. And this is basically results of his actions that was successful against the freight trains. These drone attacks were not successful because of some electric defenses system, but this railing of the freight train was successful and managed to make a quite big damage. Another prisoner ABC Moscow is now supporting is Kirill Bobrov, and this is actually from the previous times. He was supposed of being involved in insurrectionary anarchist organization Revolutionary Association of Free People between 2011 and 2012. Then this group was claiming arson attacks in Ufa in Bashkortostan against some government buildings. He managed to escape and got asylum in Austria, but eventually he returned in prison and also got a very long prison sentence, I think 15 years. And if he was arrested 15 years ago, the prison sentence would maybe be like 5 years, but now it's other time. This is where Ufa is located. It's already a bit further from Moscow. It's at the Ural Mountains. Then third anarchist prisoner is Alexei Roskhov. He is accused of burning a military enlistment office. 11th of March 2022 in the suburb of Yekaterinburg. He was eventually arrested and released from detention and fled to Kyrgyzstan, but from Kyrgyzstan he was illegally railroaded back to Russia, and in Russia he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. This is some CCTV camera footage from his action when he is lighting the Molotov cocktail. And the thing with military enlistment offices is that there are actually lots of this in Russia, from each neighborhood in bigger cities, and not so far from any village there is such, or in the central areas there are these enlistment offices. And interesting thing is that when the war started in 2022, many of these had all of their paperwork in paper. And so if you burn this building or manage to do enough damage, it might be that no one from this whole village or neighborhood in the city is going to war for many months, and until they manage to somehow restore all these statistics. So in the first year of the wars, they started a very hasty effort to digitize all of this information, and now, of course, burning of these enlistment offices doesn't make so much sense, and this campaign of arsons has kind of died down. But it was quite substantial. This is a picture of all of these arsons since during the first year and 4 months of the war, and the blue color is during the first half years before the mobilization in September, and the orange color is after. So basically this campaign of arsons was widespread in almost all the regions of Russia. And Roscoe was actually one of the first people who was doing these arsones. He was doing this around 2 weeks after the start of the wars. This was maybe second or third such action. So he managed to be one of the people who inspired this huge movement, even if he paid a very high price for that. So the first city there is the Yekaterinburg, where Roscoe was active, but all of these 3 cities that I have marked, they are relevant when it comes to repressions against anarchists. So this is the Tumen case. It's 6 comrades arrested in the end of August 2022 in Yekaterinburg and Tumen and Surgut. Yekaterinburg is in Ural, Tumen and Surgut are in Siberia. Our first arrests were in Tumen area, and this is also where most of the investigation was happening and where people are currently being held. And people are arrested of terrorism. Originally was 2 persons arrested in Tumen in the forest area with some explosives, and they were basically, the claim and the accusation is that they were preparing to blow up some electricity infrastructure in this area, fighting the Russian war infrastructure this way. The arrested in Tumen, they are Kirill Brik and Denis Aydin, but unfortunately all of the arrested were tortured. At some point they all confessed under the tortures, but eventually like 5 of the 6 recanted their confessions, and only Kirill Brik is still maintaining the confession and cooperating with the authorities, which of course puts the defense to quite tedious position. Comrades arrested in Yekaterinburg, they are Yuri Nesnamov and Daniel Chertikov. Chertikov is a veterinarian, so this is why he has this kind of animal picture. And the last is the arrested in Surgut. It's Nikita Olenik and Roman Paklin. Olenik was maintaining libertarian library in Surgut, and he's also accused of being a ringleader of this organization. So his accusation of leading a terrorist organization might result a life sentence in prisons, and others might end up being in prison for 25 years. One more anti-war case is the Chita case. These are couple of very young anarchists in the city of Chita. Alexander Zneshko and Lyubov Lizunova. They were arrested writing a graffiti "Death to the Regime." And also of administrating local counter-cultural and anti-war telegram channels. Originally, Zneshko got 6 years in prison and Lizunova got 3.5 years in prison last year in April. But Zneshko was also facing a new court sentence recently, and he got additional 5 years sentence of some claimed anti-war activities. And also Zneshko has been spending lots of his he was often being sent to the isolation because some basically trumped up things, and also because he refused to work. So now he was sent to strict regime Pekote unit. Usually it's reserved for some quite serious offenders like mafia people, but now also the very young anarchist Zneshko is in this high security thing. This is where Chita is located. It's pretty far from Moscow, almost in the Pacific Sea. One more case that was basically a comrade that was found by the Solidarity Zone. It's last year, it's the Roman Shvedov. He was in Rostov, and Solidarity Zone managed to find him. It's a anarchists who were also making some anti-war songs in the Rostov region. And Solidarity Zone managed to find him, send a lawyer, but he said that, okay, there is nothing you can do for me, rather give a lawyer to someone who the lawyer actually can be helpful. And last year in December 2024, he was sentenced to 16 years in prison, and after this he made a suicide. And we don't actually even know how he looks like. This is his, this face is just from some, it's pixelated face, it is from some mainstream publication. We don't know how he looked like. And then a place where to follow. In English, if you are not fond of Telegram channels, you can check Autonomous Action website. Its Autonomous Action was originally a libertarian communist organization that was present in around 20 cities around Russia, but currently, as is not possible to maintain this kind of semi-open network, it's existing as a media project and doesn't plan to establish organizations in the closest future. But yeah, it's still trying to set up and maintain networks in Russia to get information, to follow the situation, to publish news. And yeah, if you go to website, you can also find news in English there. The activists who are still in Russia, they just try to be there as long as possible and not to be in this situation that they actually have to run from there. So, a question, what can be done for anarchist prisoners in Russia, which is of course like supporting anti-war movement in general. It's possible to spread information, make translation actions, graffiti and so on. It's still possible to send letters of support. There are some tricks that the letters, in order to pass the censorship, they should be written in Russian, but nowadays there are good online translation tools for this. Also, if you send a paper mail, the address nowadays also should be written in Russian, at least the name of the prisoners. But this is also possible to this prisoner supporting group, they are publishing the names also in the Cyrillic fonts, and then you can just copy them by hand or print to the letters. But there is also, in many areas, it's possible to send mail by the prison mail online service, not to all the prisoners, but to quite many of them. Also possible to donate to different fundraising campaigns that are organized by ABC Moscow, the Solidarity Zone, the Fires of Freedom, and also check the information. But also it's possible to donate to BOAC via cryptocurrencies, and also it's important also to support anarchists from Belarus and Ukraine, because for example Solidarity collectives in Ukraine, ABC Belarus, and Ramen from Belarus, because in the end all of these countries, they are having the common struggle. So this is the Telegram channel. I will also link it below so that you can follow the Telegram channel, but yeah, you can also check it from this video. So yeah, this is everything that was basically up for this presentation. Thanks for your attention. Sorry for the technical issues while waiting. Hope to be able also to do some offline presentations all around anytime soon. Thank you.